Hi, and welcome back to the Loony Bin. My name is Loony, and today I want to talk about something that I feel like a lot of people do not understand the context behind a certain scene from the One Piece manga. Now, this is a scene that happened many years ago. I'm talking about like really early One Piece. Because it's a scene that so many people don't seem to understand the context behind and try to refute the importance of it because of some sort of either agenda or because they're not seeing the context and not understanding why it's so much more different and compared to something that similar happened but not as important, or the context wasn't as great as the scene prior to it. So what I am referring to is the passing of the Straw Hat. Some of you may know from either watching the anime, the live action, or even reading the manga, there is a very iconic scene in One Piece where Nami, after trying very hard, to save up 100 million berries to save a village, gets screwed over by Arlong. She cries, she stabs her shoulder for the tattoo that represented her slavery to Arlong, and she cries, and Luffy, comes up, stops her. She yells at him to go away, that he doesn't understand what's going on, and then she cries and tells him to help her, right? It's an iconic scene. He then takes his straw hat, the straw hat that he considers his treasure, and puts it on Nami's head. Boom. He turns around, walks away, then yells out, "Of course I will," and then proceeds to go with Zoro, Sanji, and Usopp towards Arlong and kick his ass, and possibly creating one of the most iconic scenes in any anime or manga in history. Now, there is important context behind the passing of the Straw Hat that a lot of people don't seem to understand, and I want to try to explain it the best way I can. I'm not the most literate person in the world, but I'll try to. Because so many people have this misconception about it and don't really understand the context. In order to understand the context, we first have to see exactly why the hat is so important to Luffy, because that actually explains the context behind the passing of the hat during Arlong Park. As many of you know from basically just the story itself, from reading like the first couple of chapters of the manga or watching the first episode of the anime, Luffy gets this hat from Shanks, right? Shanks saves Luffy. Luffy starts, yelling at him, calling, because Shanks called him a child, that he wouldn't be a great pirate. Then he yells at him, "I will show you, I'll get a crew that's better than yours, and I will beat you, and then, become king of the pirates." He starts crying, he feels like, he feels emotional, he wants to cry, even though he's trying to stay strong. Shanks sees this and puts the hat onto Luffy to comfort him, but also to make the promise, right? That, Luffy will one day find a crew that's stronger than them, and then when he becomes king of the pirates, to find him and then give back the Straw Hat. The important point that you need to understand is that when Shanks puts, the hat onto Luffy, he's trying to comfort him, but also the promise, right? But the main focus is the comfort. This is showing Luffy that Shanks is trying to comfort him in his own way. Shanks isn't the type of person who probably would show, comfort in like, the traditional sense, like, hugging a person, putting a hand over the person to try to calm them down. But he does it via the Straw Hat. And while Luffy does still cry, he does feel a little comfort that, Shanks is trusting Luffy with the Straw Hat. Shanks' is treasure. And that's why Luffy values, the hat as his treasure, because he knows how important it is to Shanks, and that he wants to keep his promise, because literally that's Luffy. Luffy wants to keep promises, and most of the time he does, right? So we move forward, and as we go see, Luffy's first adventure into becoming a pirate, we see moments where, he gets mad at people for trying to touch his Straw Hat. And most of the time you see a lot of those moments either be with a member of the crew, but most of the time it's been with Nami. She sees the importance of the Straw Hat. She fixes the Straw Hat for him, and stuff like that. She sees how much Luffy values that treasure more than gold, right? And it basically helps her understand that, treasures are not just money, gold, berries, or anything like that, but it can be something that means something a lot to a person. And she's seeing that via Luffy, right? So we see that. We see, Nami noticing how important that hat is. She understands, like, Luffy doesn't like people touching the hat, and that's very important for the context of the Arlong Park scene. It keeps going through most of the East Blue arc, And then we reach Arlong Park. We reach the scene, the iconic moment that happens. And what does Luffy do when he sees Nami, crying, and then Nami finally says, "Help me"? He does the same thing that Shanks did to him to try to comfort her, which is basically put the hat on Nami's head. Now, this is just a little, headcanon or a little theory behind this scene that I thought of, actually pretty recent, is that Luffy understands that Nami loves treasure. If Nami loves treasure, she values it, she protects it more than anything. And Luffy knows this, so he trusts her with the straw hat because she knows the value of treasure. And, the straw hat is Luffy's treasure, so, who's the best person to actually protect it? It will be her because she understands the value of treasure. So, but the main focus of the whole context behind the passing of the straw is that he's doing it to comfort her, to calm her down, the same way Shanks did to Luffy. Granted, it's not as big of a scene as the Shanks. He wasn't like crying as much as Nami was, but Nami needed some sort of reassurance. She needed to be calmed down because her entire life was just stabbed right in her fucking heart because of Arlong's betrayal. So, by seeing how important the Straw Hat is to Luffy, Nami now sees what he's trying to do, that he values that hat, and now he's lending it to her to showcase that not only is he comforting her, but to show that he trusts her. And that's very important because Nami lost a lot of trust over the years. She never trusted anybody because of the circumstances around her backstory. So, moving forward, Nami shows up at Arlong Park just before, Luffy versus Arlong. Arlong proposes that whole, Nami has to make a choice. And, it's a tough choice that Nami has to make. So what does she do next? She puts the hat down, struggling to make a decision. And then the hat basically not only does it comfort her and reassure her, but it also gives her strength to finally make a decision. And what does she do? She turns around, turns to her family, friends, and her fellow, villagers, and basically asks them to die with her as they fight against Arlong, because that choice is something that she will never make because she values her friends' life, she values their lives, and since, those were the only two options, she was not going to let Arlong dictate her, basically, life anymore. And that's really important in showcasing Nami's growth eventually later on in the series. So we move on from Arlong Park, Arlong is defeated, and the next time we see anything with like the passing of hat aside from filler episodes is in Skypiea, where Nami is shouting at Luffy, worried, terrified about Eno, and what does he do? He tosses the hat to her to try to comfort her and try to reassure her that everything will be fine. He does say, that you should stop crying because you are the fellow crewmate of the future Pirate King. So his words showcase just like he's trying to calm her down and reassure her that, to have confidence in him. That's why that passing of the hat is also important in showcasing comfort and reassurance on Nami's part, because Nami is worried, she's panicking, she's incredibly terrified about the situation. And then the moment she gets a hat, she suddenly feels comfort. She finally feels reassurance that Luffy will, get the job done. And then, that's a very important moment because as we see more and more into the story, Nami trusts Luffy. She starts to trust Luffy. She trusts to, knows that he will do whatever he needs to do to make sure that he wins against a tough opponent. And we see that clearly with the Kaido, instance that just recently happened in the anime, where Kaido was telling everybody that Luffy died. But Nami, who, trusts Luffy and, doesn't believe that Luffy died, or believes Kaido's lies, she stands up. And she doesn't need the hat anymore. Why? Because she finally understands that she can trust Luffy. Luffy's her reassurance that everything will be alright, and that no matter what whatever happens to Luffy, no matter what opponent he's facing, he will get back and win, because she understands now that, to put her trust in her captain. It's a long sequence showcasing that sort of dynamic and relationship between Luffy and Nami, where it's a mutual respect, mutual comfort, and mutual understanding that no matter what happens, Luffy will be there to kick anyone's ass that needs to be kicked, and Nami truly truly understands and truly like believes in him. That's why that scene is important, to showcase that Nami fully trusts Luffy. Even before that scene, we have the, ulti telling, Nami to say that, Luffy won't become Pirate King or anything like that. She says, nah. She doesn't care if she gets hit. She doesn't care if she dies. She's not going to lie to Ulti's face. And what helps is literally all those moments about, Luffy reassuring her with the straw hat and so on. Now, understanding this context is important because now you have moments where, other members of the crew wore a hat. Specifically only one. Usopp is the only other straw hat member that actually wore it. The only other person that actually did have the hat was, I believe, Tama. Although with Tama's situation is very similar to Nami in that, he was trying to comfort Otama because of what happened, the conversation recently about Ace and stuff like that. But it could also be like she was, holding onto his back, so the hat was going to be flopping around, so she wore it anyway. But there is context there where he was trying to comfort Otama, to make sure that, everything would be fine, and stuff like that. The only other instance was with Usopp. There is that Vivi moment, but that's from the movie, and that never necessarily happens in the manga, so I'm not really counting that per se. But if you, for instance, would want to count that, that's also another moment of Luffy showcasing that he wants to comfort somebody to make sure that, to reassure them that everything will be alright, right? Usopp, on the other hand, wore it not to comfort him. There was no need for it, to comfort Usopp. The reason why Usopp wore the hat is because literally Luffy had a big afro and was going to go fight whatever his name is, the fucking split head. I forget his name. Yay. But you understand what I'm saying. Luffy's not going to wear the hat because of the afro. It's just going to fly off. He can't, I'm assuming he can't, use the string to put it around his neck because probably, the afro he probably couldn't even put it on because of the afro. Maybe he could have put it on before that. I don't know. But there was no, context behind it except that Usopp was only holding on to her so that Luffy could go into the fight without worrying about the hat. That's all. There was no context aside from that, right? And this is why the context behind the All Along Park scene is important, right? Because it's Luffy's way of showing comfort and reassurance to somebody who needs it. Nami was like just totally just losing her mind, just losing all hope. Like her heart was just absolutely crushed with All Along's betrayal. That, Luffy handing her the hat, putting it on her head, is comforting her. And with Nami understanding the importance of the hat, where like he doesn't like anyone touching it, showcases that Luffy trusts her with it. And that's very important in the context because it helps comfort her. That Luffy trusts her so much, despite the fact that everything that she did beforehand, he doesn't care. Because he trusts her. Because he understands the type of person Nami is. Right? The true Nami. That's the context behind that thing that a lot of people just don't seem to realize. They claim that, oh, well, there's nothing, big about that because other people have wore the hat, right? But the context is important behind what he's trying to do. He's trying to show comfort. And the big reason why is because Luffy's not going to show that similar to like, hugging someone to comfort them or, doing something else, right? He doesn't do like what normal people do. He shows his comfort or trying to comfort somebody in his own way, and that's one of them, right? And with people wanting, other characters to wear the hat, or like Luffy put on the character, Luffy put the hat onto anyone else, it won't have the same impact as much as people think it will, It just won't. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing with the context. So it doesn't matter who else Luffy puts the hat on, unless it's very specifically used to comfort the character. Then you could have the same argument with that Arlong Park scene, as well as the Skypiea scene. The situation with Otama was very close because he was trying to comfort her after, he told her about Ace's death and stuff like that. And then, they were riding on, what's his name? The big lion dude, Camacho? I think that's his name? Whatever, right? He was trying to comfort her. That's Luffy's way of comforting somebody. So I just wanted to, give people a clear understanding and to try to basically clear up the misinterpretation of why that scene is very specific and why that scene is very important. And it's all about the context. everything that Oda tends to do in his writing tends to have some sort of context behind it, and a lot of people just want, you know, it to be handed to them, so that they don't have to think about the context. It's just that, oh, this happened, they showed it, boom, done. That's all you need. That's all they need to know. But every author will always have some sort of context, you know. That's why so many, you know, people enjoy show don't tell. And Luffy didn't have to tell or say anything. He just put the hat on Nami, and just from that context alone, you see that he was trying to reassure her, to comfort her, that everything will be alright, and that he will kick Arlong's ass. So that's why I wanted to make this video, because I feel like a lot of people over the years that have experienced debating and talking to don't seem to understand the context behind the hat, and sometimes it gets frustrating. But you see, I mean, but I hope you understand where I'm getting at, and yeah, so that's what I want to talk about. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in my next One Piece video, and thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.